Welcome to this webinar for high net worth clients considering a move to Cayman. I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of international experts covering many of the things that wealthy clients looking at a relocation to the island will be thinking of. As always, we love to hear from our audience, so please do put questions and comments in the chat. We'd love to know where you're watching from today, or any specific questions you have for our expert panel, and I will bring those questions straight to them in order to get them answered. Before we get into the topic to discuss today, I'm going to come to each of my panelists for a quick introduction on who they are and the type of clients that they're working with. Starting off with James O'Brien from IRG in Cayman. Welcome, James.
Well, good morning from Cayman. Thank you, Davis, and thank you for hosting this morning's event, and welcome to everybody. My name is James O'Brien. I'm based here in the Cayman Islands. I've been a resident here for over almost 18 years. I head up the luxury division of International Property Group Limited, which is a boutique-based real estate firm and relocation firm that handles pretty much high net worth clients from all over the world and helps them on board and hopefully find their forever home here in the Cayman Islands. So thank you.
Fantastic. Looking forward to getting your insight shortly. Klein Gilden from Auger in Cayman. Klein, be great to hear a little bit more about your practice.
Morning, David. Morning to my other presenters on the panel, and to all of those participants that have joined us. Thank you for joining. My name is Klein Glidden. I'm a counsel in the office of Auger in the Cayman Islands. We're a full service law firm, and I lead the local legal services team, working closely with James and other professionals in the islands in terms of providing immigration advice, the full relocation package, real estate conveyancing, company incorporation. So we look at providing our clients with a full service package, and when they make the decision with James to make Cayman their forever home, we work together with them to smooth out all the challenges that might be associated with moving to Cayman, including incorporation, setting up structures, working with a private wealth team. And so we look forward to discussing Cayman and all the wonderful opportunities that it provides this morning.
Fantastic. And the third member of the Cayman team for our webinar today, Richard Thompson. Welcome, Richard. Be great to hear a little bit more about what you do with clients on the island.
Hi, everyone. My name's Richard. I work for EFG Bank here in Cayman. EFG is a Swiss private bank with a branch here on the island. It provides full banking and investment services to international clients, where we look after in the branch a large book of business, mixture of international clients and clients based or working or invested into the island. So we can provide the full banking and the full investment solutions for anyone moving to the Cayman Islands or investing into it.
Fantastic. Joining us from London, Oliver Ingles from DDRE. Welcome, Oliver. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much from a bit more probably wet location than the Cayman Islands, but thank you very much for having me, David. Hello to everybody. My name is Oliver Ingles. I'm a real estate advisor here in prime central London. So I deal with the sales and acquisition of prime and ultra prime properties, not just in central London, but across the globe. So we work with the strategic element on acquiring assets and executing transactions at the right time.
Fantastic. We're looking forward to getting your viewpoint in more detail as we move through. Brian Cohen joining us from Canada. Welcome, Brian.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. So Brian Cohen sitting in rainy Toronto, where up until today we've actually had 27-degree weather like many of you. So I don't know what's going on in our country, but it's now turned to October finally. So I'm a private client lawyer with Gowlings WLG in Toronto. Been doing this for about 25 years now. And interestingly, over the last, I think, decade is when I've really started to see this uptick of people asking questions about how do we leave the country and how do we do it effectively, which leads to the conversation today, which should be quite interesting.
Fantastic. Great to have you with us. And last but not least, from New York City, Alicia. Great to have you with us. Alicia, it'd be great to get a little intro from you.
Thank you, David, and thanks to everyone that's in attendance. I don't know where you are, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I'm very excited to be here. I am the CEO and founder of Global Taxes based out of New York City. I am a U.S. tax advisor, and I work with multinational families who are moving to the United States, setting up businesses here, or investing in the U.S., and I help them with all of that. But on the flip side, I also work with Americans with financial assets overseas, or moving overseas, or setting up businesses overseas, or investing overseas, or giving up their US citizenship or green cards. And this, as Brian mentioned, it seems to be in vogue at the moment because I'm getting a lot of inquiries from my clients and other prospects asking me, where should I move? And what are the tax implications of moving outside of the US, and also giving up US citizenship or green cards.
Well, and that's not without its complications. So we're going to dig into that shortly. But just coming to the top of the agenda here, I'm going to bring in James and Klein just to talk about the Cayman residency options, the pathways that are available. I mean, Klein, perhaps you could kick off by sketching out, for a high net worth client interested in relocating to Cayman, what are the options that are on the table for them?
Sure, David. Thanks. We as mentioned, we work closely with James and many of the other panelists and working with our clients who are looking to exercise their options in Cayman. Cayman has attempted to create as many options as possible, which has led to a bit more complication in terms of needing someone to navigate you through the various options. But the most interesting options, I guess, for those high net worth individuals are the residency by investment options. And we have two primary residence by investments. One is designed more for entrepreneurs and people that are still actively involved in business, and the other is based more on retirees. So one of them it has a threshold requirement of a $1.2 billion US dollar investment in developed real estate. And that also has a requirement for a clean police record, the ability to maintain yourself and your dependents, because all of those options actually include dependents, spouse, children. It goes as far as parents. The intention was to really allow people to move their families into Cayman, so the dependent scope is pretty wide. And like I said, 4 basic criteria, the main difference being the investment threshold that is required. And the one that I just mentioned, the one for retirees at 1.2 million, was designed as a 25-year residency certificate, which is renewable for another 25 years. There's the other alternative to that is the $2.4 million investment in developed real estate, which is on limited residence. The thing that we're seeing being the most attractive about that difference is that it actually has a pathway to citizenship. And as most people will know, the Cayman Islands is a British overseas territory. So the citizenship that is available through that pathway is actually British citizenship, which is a strong, when people are considering an alternate to where they're coming from now, British citizenship is a strong alternative. The challenge with that is it's not immediate. It requires you to actually live in the country for 5 years. And so
is there a day count around that, Klein, as well? They have to, over those 5 years, what kind of length of time are they having to spend annually?
So for the residence itself, it's 1 day per year. However, if the intention is to acquire citizenship, you need to prove a permanent connection with the territory, which means that you can't be outside of the territory for more than 90 days per year, with an exemptions for business, medical, education purposes. But the idea is that Cayman is your permanent home. You're not just taking up residence at Cayman as your permanent home, and then that will qualify you for British Overseas Territory citizenship. So two basic options. One at a $2.4 million investment that has the potential for citizenship, and one at a $1.2 million investment that gives you a 25-year renewable certificate. So for a total of up to 50 years for those. And the idea being, again, like I said, for those that were retired they might see 25 years as being a long enough time to come and take care of the sun, sea, sand, and sophistication of the Cayman Islands.
Do you find that clients are comparing Cayman with other jurisdictions repeatedly, or it can be very mixed as to whether they're coming to Cayman or somewhere else, just completely personal preference? Or do you find there's certain jurisdictions that arise time and again as a comparison for what you can offer?
So it's very mixed, David, depending on the circumstances. So like I said, if you're a retiree and you're looking at Cayman as an option, you know, all the benefits of proximity to the US, the safety, security, those issues are significant concerns. The other issue with Cayman is that compared to the rest of the Caribbean and many of the other options, the health options in Cayman have significantly improved over the years. And when individuals are looking at a jurisdiction, obviously being able to get comprehensive health care and the provision of those services is going to be a significant factor. The challenge that we have is if you're looking to renounce your citizenship, your current citizenships, Cayman isn't going to be the right option for you because, you know, we're not selling citizenship as an overseas territory. What we're offering is residency, and there is an option for citizenship. But we're actually seeing quite a bit of our clients who are able to go to one of the other jurisdictions, actually acquire citizenship from a jurisdiction that they wouldn't necessarily be wanting to live in for a range of reasons. But then they'll acquire citizenship there, but come and have residency and make Cayman their primary home.
Thank you. There's two quick questions in the Q&A for you, client. One is that is there an age requirement for the retirement visa, or is it that if the capital sum's met, they look at the time, or how does that work on an age basis?
It's not an age. I mentioned retirement because, as you know, David, I was a member of government at the time when we implemented those options, and so I know the rationale behind it. So the idea was to look at, you know, having a service for those individuals who might want Cayman as a permanent place. So they may be coming from the US. They're going to come and live in Cayman at retirement, but they're going to go back to have social security benefits as such or whatever in the US at some point in time. So that was a consideration, but there's no age benefit we're seeing or age requirement. We're seeing individuals coming at a range of ages and they take up the options that are more suitable to them.
Okay, thanks. And James, just bringing you in, obviously a big part of the decision to relocate is where you're going to live, the property you're going to buy. If you're a ultra high net worth client, you've got certain tastes and standards and the type of way you want to live your life. So could you give us a characterization of the local property market and trends that you see?
For sure. Thanks, David, and thanks, Klein, for teeing that up. Yeah, I mean, we've got a phenomenal array of real estate offerings for such a small island. Everything from branded residential real estate, such as the Ritz-Carlton, Mandarin Oriental residence is currently under construction. So, you know, those are the epitome of five-star luxury branded real estate living that you'll find anywhere in the world. So I think we have more branded real estate here in our tiny island than any other Caribbean nation. And that's attributed to the safety factor, the medical, the educational standards here in the Cayman Islands that Klein has alluded to. And then the flip side of that, I mean, you know, in terms of expensive beachfront homes and villas, up until maybe recently, I would say rarefied air was about 10, 15 million US dollars. Now we have homes that are selling north of 30 million US dollars. So that's really equaling, you know, the Lyford Keys of the world in the Bahamas. Everybody's heard of that in the Caribbean, and other grand estates in other Caribbean islands. So, you know, the product is definitely there. So you can find a really nice single family home. And I suppose I should categorize what I consider, and most of my peers, as luxury is really 3 million US dollars and north of that. So that really fits the threshold for residency by investment that Klein has just talked about. So you can get a beautiful beachfront condo for $3 million on the famous 7 Mile Beach. And you can get a really nice family home, a modest style family home in a very nice gated community, gated for prestige, not for other reasons. Because again, I think when I go abroad, the one thing I'm selling is safety. It's safety for your capital. It's safety for your family. It's safety for your kids. And it's a sound and safe investment, which has proven over and over time again. So we have everything from, as I said, beachfront condos, large estate homes in beautiful gated communities. We've got great beachfront villas on the north side and the east end of the island, which are kind of more tranquil. And you can get anything from 1,200 square feet, 2-bedroom apartment, right up to, you know, we handled a 30,000 square foot single family residence a couple of years ago, on a 50-acre estate. So the full spectrum is here. We just need to get better known, I suppose, in the jurisdiction.
Wow. Klein, do you want to?
David, if I could just jump in
Please.
to answer the other question that you had. You know, the two options. So 1.2 million is a 25-year certificate. 2.4 million is the unlimited residency. For the 1.2 million, the requirement for that residence is you have to spend 30 days in the jurisdiction per year. For the 2.4 option, unlimited residence, you have to spend 1 day per annum in the jurisdiction to maintain that residence. Where we got into a discussion on the 90 days per year was the day count that's required if you're actually trying to acquire citizenship, right? So British Overseas Territory citizenship, which is the next step along that ladder, requires you to meet the minimum of 90 days outside of the jurisdiction per annum. The intention being that you want to prove that Cayman is your permanent home, because the idea for citizenship, the qualification for citizenship, is that you have a permanent connection to the overseas territory. So you have to have that residency for 5 years. And during that 5-year period, you can't have been out of the jurisdiction for more than 90 days per annum, unless it was for business reasons, for health reasons, or for education reasons. But that's, again, not to do with the residency requirement. You know, Cayman is pretty comfortable that if you come and spend money, choose a property in Cayman, that it is going to become your primary home. So the requirement for residency in that category is only 1 day per year. But we know that once you come, you're going to fall in love and you're going to spend a significant amount of time in Cayman. And again, just for those participants that may not know, the rationale, again, from government, and the reason for why government is quite comfortable with that is because Cayman uses a consumption-based tax system, right? And so the idea being that you're going to come and live in Cayman and consume, and therefore contribute to the economy, because our model is based on consumption. And to consume and to benefit Cayman, you have to be there. So there's an incentive for the government to make that process as easy as possible for you.
Fantastic. Thank you for taking on those questions, Klein. There's more opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A. But James, are you noticing any particular nationalities coming to you? Are you noticing inquiries for real estate coming from certain corners of the world? What's your view?
Yeah. Well, traditionally, David, our primary target was the US, right, because of its proximity to the Cayman Islands. I mean, we're literally an hour and 15 minutes flight to Miami. So yeah, the tri-state area in particular has been a really good source of clients. But more recently, in the last 10 years, we're seeing a lot of Canadians, obviously, and Brian and his team up there do a great job in promoting what we do down here in the Cayman Islands. The UK, obviously, traditionally been a British Overseas Territory. We've always had a good array of UK clients. And sometimes, more recently, we're seeing Asian clients and even Middle Eastern clients and clients from Monaco, believe it or not, that are all sort of coming via London and London via Cayman. But yeah, I mean, I've got clients from mainly the US and North America, UK, Ireland, Monaco, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australasia, and I'm sure I'm missing one or two Middle Eastern countries as well. So yeah, it's interesting. It's not as traditional a route as it used to be, which was sort of US, UK, and Canada. It's more than that now.
Fantastic. Well, we bring Alicia in on some of those US tax issues, because there's a lot of complexity there, isn't there, Alicia? If someone's considering a move out of the US into Cayman, what are some of the things you would work with them on advising them to think about?
Right, right. So I believe Klein mentioned that there's only a consumption tax in Cayman. There are no other taxes. There's no income taxes or capital gains taxes or inheritance taxes, which unfortunately we do have in the United States. And once you are a U.S. person, and what I mean by U.S. person is a U.S. citizen or green card holder, you are subject to worldwide taxation no matter where you are. So if you continue to be a U.S. citizen and you move to the Cayman Islands or somewhere else in the world, or you are a green card holder, you will continue to have to file income tax returns in the United States, pay taxes on your worldwide income. Cayman does not have a tax, so you won't be getting any foreign tax credits for taxes paid to another country if you move to Cayman. And then also you have the estate tax to worry about.
So there's not a lot of tax planning opportunities as such, is there? I mean, or how do people organize their affairs when they're thinking about a move? What are the big decisions that they make?
Well, I mean, they can do some tax planning. It gets complicated. They can set up trusts. They can set up insurances. I don't work much with those, but private placement life insurances, and maybe set up foreign corporations. But the thing is that they will have to continue filing and reporting whatever they have.
And like any international move, it's always that could be a good point to review their affairs, make sure they're up to date, and explore any planning opportunities.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
But Brian, on the Canadian side, what's the picture from Canada in terms of a relocation of a Canadian into Cayman?
So it's easier and harder all at the same time. Unlike our US friends, we tax on residency, not citizenship. Once you've left, you've left. So that's a positive. The issue with Canada and places such as Cayman where there's no treaty is often making sure you've left, and that's really where we come into play. Making sure you've severed those ties with Canada, and the big three are spouse, dependent, and house. You want to make sure that you've moved those as far away as possible so that you're not resident in Canada anymore, because otherwise Canada can take a position that you're actually resident in both jurisdictions, which is not something you want to fall into. There's a lot of other smaller factors that come into play, like club memberships, religious affiliations, professional memberships, and things like that are secondary tier that the government may look at. But typically it's those big three you care about. And it's funny, Alicia, when you said what planning exists, immediately said trusts. The people that are leaving Canada looking to come down to Cayman are often high net worth, whatever that term may mean, and almost all of them will have a trust structure with them in Canada. Those are what we really take time to look at when someone's either going down to the island to live and looking to set up structures once they get there, or leaving and already have the structures here, to make sure that we don't trip over some of our Canadian tax rules, because while you can cease to be Canadian resident relatively easily, what you have problems with is trust getting tied back into Canada. And in that way, our system is a little draconian, and you want to be careful to set up your structure. And there's many people on this call and otherwise that do this all the time, so that once you're on island, you are able to have a trust structure that's effective for your family this generation and into the next. We can get into that later if you want, but that's really where you get trapped. And the other thing to keep in mind is when you leave Canada, there is a deemed disposition that people keep their eye on. We, unlike other jurisdictions, we don't have an estate tax. We don't have a death tax. What we do have is a capital gain tax, which arises on a disposition. And there's deemed dispositions at two key points in people's lives. Number one, passing. When you die, there is a deemed disposition, the ultimate sale of all your assets. And when you leave the country, there is also a deemed disposition of the majority of your assets, excluding specific things, some registered plans, real estate, corporations that hold real estate. Those you can actually get a deferral on. And that's where your planners, your lawyers, your accountants, and others come into play to help on those to make sure your move is efficient.
Because if you've got illiquid assets, is that then you can get you can achieve a deferral because the tax bill would be
so substantial. The assets, such as if you just think of a boring old investment account, there'll be a deemed disposition of that investment account on your way out the door. You can leave security with our government that allows you to defer the payment of that tax for a period of time. And thankfully, there's no interest on that security. And if you leave enough behind, it's usually pretty easy to get. The government is willing to deal with you. You just have to renew it periodically. Other assets, such as real property, though, the deferral is there's not even a tax until you sell, because the government looks at it and says, we're going to know when you sell that because you're going to have to do something on title. We will get our tax hit at that point in time. So there's often those big assets, you don't, it's not necessarily a deferral. The tax just doesn't kick in. The liquid assets, you can get a deferral if need be by way of paying the tax by way of providing security to our government on the way out the door.
Okay, thank you. And Alicia, to bring you back in, the conversation and computation around expatriation is a complex one. Perhaps you could set out why people consider that move and what it would entail.
Okay, so there's a difference between someone moving to another country to live and change, I would say, tax residency. Well, for the US, they would always be a tax resident, no matter where they move, like I mentioned earlier. But someone who expatriates under the US tax laws would be someone who gives up their US citizenship, or if they are a long-term resident, meaning they have a green card, they gave up their green card. And so if they are considered to be covered expatriates, they would be subject to an exit tax. A covered expatriate is someone who has a net worth of more than $2 million or more at the time of expatriation, or someone who hasn't been in compliance with their US tax returns for the last 5 years before expatriation, or someone who, and I'm forgetting, I'm getting a little nervous, sorry. There's a third prong, someone whose tax liability has been more than an average that comes out every year because it goes up by inflation. I think it's like $180,000 at this point. So if their average tax liability for the last 5 years has been more than that, then they will be considered a covered expatriate. So it's it could be 1, 2, or all of the above that would make these US persons who move out and expatriate subject to the exit tax. And the exit tax is a tax on a deemed disposition of all of the assets, meaning a pretend, like it's as if they sold everything, all of their assets, the day before they expatriate, and therefore they will be subject to an exit tax, about 20%, depending on what the asset is. But although they are not really disposing of anything, they would have to pay a tax. So it's definitely it would impact their pocket. Now, some people think that, oh, well, once they leave the United States, and this, when I say people, US persons, they think that once they leave the US and they move to another country, they no longer have to file tax returns or pay taxes in the US. That is not correct. Like I mentioned earlier, US persons, meaning US citizens and green card holders, will continue to be US tax residents and responsible for filing annual income tax returns and international information returns. What does that mean? That means that if, say, for example, they open financial accounts overseas, because most likely they will, because now they're going to live overseas, and if they meet some filing thresholds, they will have to file and report all of the non-US financial accounts on a foreign bank account report and send it to the IRS. And that's important because if they don't, there is a $10,000 penalty, I would say a minimum penalty of $10,000 for not filing a foreign bank account report, also known as an FBAR, and also those penalties can go up.
Okay. And Brian, I mean, what makes for a successful move? You noticed an uptick in clients asking about moving abroad. If someone's got a kind of blank sheet of paper, they've got the asset base in order to make a move to Cayman, what are the things that would make for a successful exit? What's on the checklist?
So on the typical checklist would be, the top of the checklist is the date, right? If you if you firm up a date, often that will make your dream more of a reality. Whereas saying it's going to happen seems to be, it gets pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And that also allows you to start planning for your exit and any taxes that may arise at that point in time. Then you start looking at the asset mix and say, okay, so we have something in Canada called a tax-free saving account. An account such as that, once you leave the country, doesn't serve a lot of use, and usually we'll say those accounts you can be wound up and look to get offshore with you. You look at your corporate interests. Is the intention when you leave to keep those businesses that exist in Canada as an ongoing concern? Are you leaving it behind, or are you going to be working with that company offshore? Because the rules that affect those Canadian-controlled private companies, which is a term that some people on the island know and are now afraid of because those rules changed recently with court cases, is the intention that you're now going to be offshore, so that company is no longer a Canadian-controlled private company, or is it going to stay onshore with different people controlling it? So you look at that structuring. Beyond that, the things that will be of importance is making sure that you line up. There's real estate people sitting here today that James will tell you, make sure you've lined up when you get down there, you're ready to move in. I have clients that have called me this week that said, I want to go tomorrow. Literally, I want out of the country tomorrow. I'm like, well, that's nice. That's not going to happen.
Give them my name, Brian.
I think they may have. And it's a very interesting plan. So structuring it all so that your flow actually works with the timing that you want to be there. And then they make a list and would hopefully provide us with, or their accounting advisors with, the list of where your membership's going through them with a fine tooth comb and say, keep this one, don't keep that one. And that way they know when they go down that beyond a closer connection test, which is if someone moved to the US, what we would be looking at, which jurisdiction you're closer connected to. You can say your connections to Canada have basically been severed. You're left with just your kids. Hopefully you've moved your cottage property in Muskoka into their name as well, so that doesn't exist. And so you come down to the island using your phrase of a clean page with a clean slate, so that you can say, as of Jan 1, because that's an easy day, right? You are no longer Canadian, you are now Caymanian, and you can have a great time down there and start your clock running, going back to my trust conversation, for that 5-year period that you need to run before you set up those offshore structures that are wonderful for your future generations.
Super helpful and very clear. Thank you, Brian. Oliver, just to bring you in, I mean, James mentioned on the top clients relocating to Cayman from all over, including obviously the historic links to the UK is huge. What's your assessment at the moment on prime London property? You deal with wealthy international buyers buying and selling in London. Give us a snapshot of what you see activity in the UK.
Well, funny enough, last week I was in Monaco at the start of last week with Henley and Partners, and they also do citizenship for investment. And whilst I was out there, it was really interesting where they showed us a graph of the globe from 20 years ago, and you could pick out the top 6 or 7 cities where a high proportion of the ultra high net worths lived, okay, or had residency. Fast forward 20 years, and it was literally like a spider's web, okay? They have, with the globalization now, businesses, you know, they are able to live and work for wherever they want. And the Cayman probably came up every half an hour alongside a few others of like Panama and places which you probably wouldn't have ever thought of 10 years ago. So this panel is perfectly on topic. But what I'm seeing, unfortunately, here in London at the moment, we have a lot of obviously taxation policy changes. Okay, the biggest one being the non-dom tax, status changes, where we are now wanting to tax them on their global wealth. So unfortunately for ourselves, we've had about 1,000 millionaires leave per month here now over the past 12 to 16 months in London. Many millionaires leaving, and unfortunately that has then created a mass exodus of buyers from the marketplace, and a lot of properties on the market. Okay, so it's certainly what we would call a buyer's market out there at the moment. The problem is that now some clients are not. We have had really not much capital growth over the last decade in central London, and with a fairly high stamp duty tax on the way in, there's a lot of clients, unfortunately, which are having to take losses. And at the moment, unless they are very keenly priced to sell, it's taking time. And I think that was probably one of my key pointers. And I think Brian spoke about it then. In my experience, clients come to me 2 years before they actually exit. Okay. like in any marketplace, whether you're exiting and disposing assets in the real estate market or stocks and shares or a business, you have to time the execution of the exit at the right point. And so they come to me, a few years beforehand to tell me their plans, and we put in the right strategic plan in place to exit at the right time. Okay. But again, also in central London at the moment, assets above £10 million are on average taking about 14 to 16 months to sell. So again, it's not a quick, it's not a quick turnaround. And my advice to anyone looking to do that, and if you are exiting London, is to have these chats with experts like myself and the team on, on the panel today.
Because if property as well is sat around on portals and things like that, having a strategy to sell and that conversation's going on with a long lead in is important, isn't it? It's kind of obvious, but I mean, what's your view on people creating a strategy to sell if they are selling in the UK at the top end?
Yeah, look, it's incredibly pivotal and vital now that you have the right strategy. The monopoly of the portals, here in London, we have like Rightmove and Zoopla, etc., are kind of gone above the £10 million mark. Okay, you do not want to sit on a portal for a 12, 16 month period. The value of your asset will depreciate. So there are more and more deals being done off market. 35% of the deals I do, we either acquire a home or sell a home off market. And like you said, you're in that process for nearly, it could be up to 2 years. So having the right strategy with keeping the listing fresh, and making sure that the pricing is aligned with the market, and that you're not, overvaluing an asset which will sit there, ultimately doesn't do well for the client, because they have ultimate plans to execute and move somewhere else.
Thank you. And Richard, just to bring you in, Brian mentioned the uptick in inquiries, people mentioning to him about looking to go offshore. You're on the other side of that, noticing more inbound high net worths coming to Cayman. What's your assessment of the trend of people looking at residency options on the island, and the wealth management services you provide for them from there?
Yeah. As the rest of the guys have mentioned, there is an uptick in high net worth individuals looking to move to the island, and it's been driven by a combination of factors, both internally with regards to the improvement of the infrastructure and the quality of life, the offerings that are available here on the island is really driving that demand from an island-centric point of view, and plus changing circumstances in other parts of the world, which are causing people to look elsewhere, has resulted in a significant uptick in people looking to move to the island, at least look and then arrive, and then ultimately purchase properties, make investments, and move family offices and their families over to the island. So naturally, when you're dealing with such people, it's key that when they arrive on the island, the banking facilities and the investment management facilities, as with the law firms and the corporate service providers, match what their expectations are. So what really we are seeing is a demand for good quality private banking and good quality asset management, because ultimately people, like they would with their normal lives, would expect the continuity from that. So we are experiencing an uptick of people coming in, and the private banking services need to match their expectations in terms of service levels and performance.
And from the portfolio management side, I mean, there's no tax constraints, or we've heard that the tax position in Cayman is straightforward. How do you deliver your, do you need to, when a client comes in, I guess, rebalance the portfolio? Some of the tax constraints that were there might have been alleviated. The reference currencies might have altered. How do you kind of go about working with a new client who's moved to Cayman from another location to construct the portfolio and manage that on an ongoing basis?
Well, I think the key consideration there is to be as flexible as possible. I think Klein mentioned with regards to how different circumstances could change, whether someone's moving here at a certain stage of their life, whether it's a retirement focus or they're coming here to work and continue to generate the wealth. I think that's the key driver as to how you would position an investment portfolio and general banking as well. But for sure, if you moving from, say, Canada, for example, and you're used to Canadian dollars and your assets may be in there, there's no need to reconfigure the portfolio into a different currency. As an international private bank, for example, we can offer all currencies and have access to all the major security markets. So honestly, I don't really think it's a case of pressing the reset button on any investment strategy. I think that the strategy and the contents of those investments can stay the same. And really the question is a person's aims and achievements changing? For example, if they were in a certain country and they were working and developing their wealth, now this may be the second stage of that development, where they may need to look at asset preservation for future generations, such as the trust structures that Brian mentioned, or ultimately are they looking for income? So really we have the full investment universe available to us to generate assets, to generate more income, or to generate growth, depending on what the client needs. But I think the key point here is that things don't have to change. It's just a continuation of what's gone on before, and things can evolve naturally. There's no knee-jerk reaction to rearrange things if it's not necessary.
Thank you. And James, are buyers coming to you buying cash? Are they have finance in place? What's a typical high net worth who's coming to buy property with you looking at?
Yeah, it's a great question, David. I think it's primarily a cash transaction. So those clients are able to move pretty quickly, but there are great financing options available on island as well. But I would say that 70% of my trades are in cash. Now that's whether they're financing elsewhere and converting to cash to come down to Cayman. But yeah, 70% are cash transactions, 30% are financed.
Okay, fantastic. And just so just to illustrate some of these points, just to sketch out a kind of client scenario, Alicia, I'd like to bring you in. Say if we had a US-based executive with a $50 million net worth, mixture of property and investments, looking to relocate down to Cayman. What are some of the top questions what would you want to establish with them as it was an initial meeting while they're brainstorming the idea of relocating abroad?
Okay, so relocating, as I mentioned before, won't trigger attacks. It's if they move to the Cayman Islands or somewhere else, they again will be subject to reporting requirements in the US and worldwide taxation. Now, what would trigger attacks is if they decide to actually give up citizenship. And if they give up citizenship, obviously with you said it's a $50 million investor person who's moving, they will definitely be a covered expatriate, and it's going to be very hard to get them under the $2 million. But they can do a few things. They can gift assets to reduce that net worth. They can set up trusts as well to get under the 2 million. But again, it's going to be very hard because it's 50 million minus 2 it's a big number, 48 million. But so if they are a covered expatriate, I mean, they will definitely pay an exit tax when they move to Canada. I mean, to the Cayman Islands. If they don't give up citizenship, then they will just continue to file tax returns in the US. They could try to set up some trusts. Again, I mean, that gets very complicated because, again, as I mentioned, US citizens will be subject to worldwide taxation. But they could do with some time, we can do some planning on putting together maybe some entities, structuring some entities, forming corporations, trusts. However, all of these will need to be reported.
Okay, thank you. And Brian, do you want to contrast that to the Canadian position for a similar client of a similar level of wealth?
So it really, there's different things to look at, as I think I referred to. So maybe shifting gears a little bit and talk about someone with a corporation instead. As I've noted, the investments would be deemed disposition, get security, or pay the tax. With corporations, before you go, there are certain attributes that proper plan would need to consider. For instance, in Canada, we have something called a capital dividend account, where you can get, if there's funds in that account, you can get them out as a Canadian resident to a shareholder tax-free. You leave the country without pulling that out, the corporation will have a higher value than it otherwise would need to. You're going to pay more tax on the exit, and then you will not be able to use that tax-deferred status or tax-free status as a non-resident of Canada. So you're going to look at all those tax attributes in the company and take advantage of them before you leave. Similarly, when you look at a company, depending on the nature of the assets, if you have enough lead time, you can deal with those assets and potentially mitigate some of the exit tax by careful planning as to how you deal with the assets within the company themselves. So you sit down with those professionals well in advance to try to get that tax as low as possible within the rules that have long been established in Canada. And then you take those assets, and if you need to, you can leave the shares behind as security and defer that tax. And other than that, it will really be, especially for a successful entrepreneur with strong family ties, taking the steps to make sure while the family ties will remain strong, the ties to Canada will be as weak as possible.
Okay, thank you. And Oliver, if there's a London property in the mix with this kind of high net worth client, or indeed have other family members looking to live in the UK and come into the market, they could sit tight and buy and hold. They might be uncertain at the moment of selling the property. What kind of things would you start talking to someone about if they had an existing property in play?
Yeah, look, I think if you're looking to potentially enter the London marketplace, there's a real opportune time. Prices are down, over the last 5 to 10 years. I was doing a pricing analysis for a client at the moment that we're looking to acquire an apartment in Mayfair, and since 2015 to now, then 17% down. So there's definitely long-term capital growth, I feel, to come into London. I think we spoke about it briefly beforehand. Every market is cyclical, okay? And like when you're wanting to acquire assets in any market, you want to buy them when they're at their lowest. So there's certainly some really good opportunities out there. I'm acquiring a lateral house in Marylebone at the moment for under £1,000 per square foot, and that's not been seen for decades, So, but again, if you're looking to acquire assets in central London, it's speaking to the key advisors around you again, currency brokers, depending on what currency you're looking to purchase in, how you're going to structure it is vitally important now, and Alicia touched on it really well. Trusts, SPVs, etc. Really get the right advice, because so many times I've seen you go out and you find a property, but you're not really ready to transact because you don't know your structure of your acquisition. And I think if you get everything aligned, you're in a much stronger place to acquire the asset at the best possible price.
Thanks. And James, for a new client coming down, if they're less familiar with the island and they're open to ideas, where would you start off your conversation with them about the kind of property they might want to buy?
Yeah, it's if they just want a vacation home, obviously you start on the beach and you look at really great condo buildings. We call them condos this side of the pond. Then if it's a larger family and they're looking for more of a neighborhood feel, there's an array of premium gated communities along the 7 Mile Beach corridor. So literally it's a 5 to 7 minute drive to the beach. I mean, nowhere is too far here in Cayman, but they have everything that they're used to from their home country, with the attractions of the beach being very nearby. If they want a bit more seclusion, then we have larger villas up on the east end of the island and the north side. There's a very favorite spot. A lot of vacationers are very familiar with Rum Point. Really, truly tranquil, and you get great sunsets up there as well. But really, really good tranquility. But yet only 40 minutes from the airport. 15, 20 minutes shopping. And healthcare, I mean, Klein touched on it earlier. I mean, we've got one of the best healthcare systems is definitely in the Caribbean and maybe in the Western world. We have more physicians per capita of head than most westernized countries. So, with 3 private hospitals and a public hospital for less than 100 square miles, I dare say you find a better healthcare system in the world. Education obviously is key with a lot of my high net worth families. we offer both the international baccalaureate and the British based educational system, so GCSEs, A levels. And again, Cayman is seen as still a disadvantaged area in the Caribbean. So a lot of very, very bright students here get really good opportunities to enter premium universities and colleges all over the world because they're coming from a disadvantaged region. So education, healthcare, all of it ticks all the boxes, and we have an array of communities and neighborhoods, from beautiful beaches to really leafy suburbs, in which they should definitely find something.
James, sorry, David, you didn't mention the rum cake, James. Just for all the people watching know, I met James in London a couple of months ago, and he bought some rum cake back from the Cayman Islands. Best cake I've ever had. Not to influence your decision on moving or not.
Fantastic.
You've just given my secret away. Thank you, Oliver.
And Klein, I mean, we heard from you on the top on the pathways, but then as OJ, I guess you'd also be looking at, they've got business interest in new structures set up. You can look at their total needs and give them any kind of legal advice around a range of things that they'll need on a relocation.
Yeah, I mean, David, as again, it's going to be pretty bespoke advice depending on the needs of the client. But the most important thing, I think, is that when a client comes to us, the first thing is as James said, if they're simply looking for a vacation home, they're coming down, there's no citizenship considerations, there's no tax considerations. Being a tax lawyer in Cayman makes it pretty easy. No tax. It's pretty uncomplicated compared to Brian and Alicia, right? But once a client is introduced to us, if there are those concerns, the main question we have is whether they've engaged counsel on shore. That's their most important consideration to look at, ensuring that they're getting the good advice in terms of whether it's UK, Canadian, US. It's all going to require them to make sure that they've had those discussions and done some level of planning, even before looking at Cayman. And so I think the level of sophistication for the providers that you have on this panel, obviously, who are very experienced, is very important for those individuals considering. But from a Cayman standpoint, they get to Cayman, if we get the pleasure to, they're asking us about investments, we'll work with people like Richard and his team in terms of introducing them over. And then we'll look at the standard, planning, the basic, very tried and tested components, initially a will for the Cayman assets. Then we'd look at potentially trust. And if they're still going to have the connections that were mentioned, then again, we'll work with Brian and Alicia in terms of what they can and what they can't do. And Cayman has some pretty innovative, creative structures that if you cut all your ties to the UK, Canada, US, and elsewhere, in addition to things like trust, we actually have the Cayman Islands Foundation Company, which people use for their wealth planning and estate planning. But again, it's a relatively new product, and it doesn't have the jurisprudence associated with, for example, trust, and the way as to whether the regulatory agencies, whether Canadian or US, is going to deal with that. It's not as tried and tested as, for example, a trust where everyone kind of knows and knows how it will be treated in the respective home jurisdiction. But there are a range of options. We work together. We're proud of being a full service firm. And when we say full service, it's a concierge service, even for things when people are relocating. One of the things that aren't considered is the relocation of their pets, importation of their pets, importation of their art. It's a range of considerations that are there. And we look forward to working with those clients and ensuring that it's a smooth transition and move into Cayman.
Thanks. And Richard, question for you in the Q&A around currency. And I suppose if there's a substantial outlay for a property, how do you work with clients where there might be volatility in currency markets, timelines might stretch around a property transaction, but zooming out, how do you work with clients if particularly they've been in a different reference currency coming into Cayman? I mean, you touched on it earlier, but perhaps you could expand a little bit.
Yeah, with specific regard to property transactions, obviously with the increase of people that we're seeing coming to the island, naturally the number of property transactions that we take part of with our clients increases. And I think the first and foremostly the key consideration there, it can be quite a stressful time for clients. Not only are they moving jurisdictions, but they're also having to buy a property. And so with regards to that, the key aim for us and for James and Klein, for example, would be to put the client first in terms of the service levels and understanding what's required. So with a transaction, especially if the client is coming from a GBP background or Euro or Canadian dollar, generally the price will be in US dollars. And so there would be an FX consideration there, which, especially with the US dollar at the moment, is quite volatile. So there are options with regards to obviously fixing rates and using options and futures to be able to, for certain, set the price in US dollars at a future date. So ultimately that would give a client, especially when they're dealing with some of the prices that James mentioned, significant amounts, clients may want to have that certainty to fix the price by way of an option mechanism. So they know in ahead of time that the US dollar price, what they were paying, will translate into whatever currencies they need to be in. And likewise, if that isn't the case, because obviously there are uncertainties involved in that, then there would be a straight transaction by way of a foreign exchange. So the key thing there is to work with a bank that is going to obviously give good terms on any foreign transaction, and ultimately has access to a pool of currencies depending on where the client comes from, which is where like a private bank would come into play to make sure that a property goes smoothly by way of the transaction, and obviously the cost to the client if there is an FX in place. And then also just touching on what James mentioned there with regards to the proliferation of cash transactions, obviously clients that already have portfolios of stocks, bonds and funds, for example, and they may be moving those assets out of the country they are moving from, to facilitate a property transaction. It's not always necessary to liquidate some of those assets and to use those liquid funds to then buy a property. That portfolio could be borrowed against, for example, so the clients are able to keep the portfolio invested and growing, hopefully at a good rate, and then they could leverage that portfolio to extract some cash and pay for the property that way. So there are lots of options in terms of cost and flexibility for a client coming to the island and looking to purchase a property.
Well, thank you. We are out of time, but I'm just going to come to James O'Brien for a closing thought. We're going to tee up a video that we're going to play shortly, which gives you a visualization of the beautiful Cayman Islands. But perhaps, James, you could just give us a couple of closing thoughts while we get that ready. We've had a great hour discussing all the different things that people need to think about.
Yeah, well, firstly, David, thank you. Thanks to you and Sophie and your team for hosting what I feel was a really great test pilot webinar. We came up with this idea a couple of months ago, and obviously I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, in particular my two Cayman friends, where a lot of clients are saying for the longest time that when they come and they try and transact and do business in Cayman, it's becoming easier and easier, and it feels like home to them. And that's, you've got great law firms like Klein's representing OJ. We've got an array of great law firms, Richard as well, representing a great private bank, and there's other wealth planners here on island. And then to our international fellows, Oliver in London represents a phenomenal team that we work closely with on London Prime Real Estate. Brian as well represents a fantastic team in Canada, and it's an emerging client base for us, and Alicia as well, with these very, very complicated tax structures in the US, and US citizens genuinely feeling more and more comfortable renouncing their citizenship and jumping through all the hoops. So we've a great team on this panel this morning. And I would say, Cayman, the residency doesn't really start with a tax form here in Cayman. It starts with a front door. and the property here is more than a home. It's an anchor that unlocks residency and stability for the home family. And I think in Cayman, and you know, I'm biased, but you know, it's a passport to permanence. And with that said, I'd like to thank everybody that joined us this morning, and thanking the attendees. We've held the attendees for a long time, and I'll hand over to you. Thanks, David.
Fantastic. Let's play that video. Thank you.